My betrothed came back from the front lines broken. Not just defeated, but missing his right leg entirely. His glittering future reduced to ash. Acting on my family's demands, I traveled to end our engagement, when suddenly glowing text materialized in front of me. What an absolute idiot this side character is. The protagonist is fated to rule as an emperor's equal. Humiliate him by canceling the betrothal now, and you'll have your face slashed open before being dumped in the streets to die of starvation. She was dealt royal cards but played them like a complete fool. Terror seized me. Looking into Li Wei's dark, hollow eyes, I swallowed every word about breaking things off, instead fussing over his injuries with exaggerated worry. I am the rightful daughter of the Zhao household. My father holds a pathetic 7th-rank position in the imperial court. Beyond showing his face twice monthly at official gatherings, he dedicates every waking moment to scheming his way up the social hierarchy. As his most valuable asset, he exhausted every resource to arrange an advantageous match for me, the heir of General Li, who commanded 2nd-rank authority at court. That was my fiancé. To give you perspective, my father couldn't even glimpse General Li's shadow during court proceedings. Yet this engagement let my father clap the general on the back after sessions and call him kinsman. Yesterday, however, our perfect arrangement shattered. Word of General Li's catastrophic defeat reached the capital alongside news that the general and his lady had perished, and their son Li Wei had lost his leg. My father's entire world crumbled instantly. Desperate to avoid being dragged down with the Li family's fall from grace, he commanded me to dissolve the engagement with Li Wei immediately. Still fantasizing about marrying my daughter? Keep dreaming. Don't grieve, precious daughter. Once this scandal fades, father will absolutely secure you an even better husband. I completely agreed with my father's assessment. I had zero interest in becoming wife to a cripple. So at first light the following morning, I departed with our head servant. Guilt gnawed at me enough that I had him pack various medicinal supplements. When we reached the Li estate, the steward answering the door wore white mourning garments. Walking through the grounds, the enormous property felt abandoned and lifeless. Though people remained, everything radiated collapse and ruin. I was planning to finish this quickly enough to return for the midday meal when abruptly, glowing text appeared before me. What a completely brainless supporting character. Cancel the engagement now and you'll never have the chance to ride his rise to power later. The male protagonist is destined to become this dynasty's sole king of foreign blood. Shame him today and you'll be scarred, abandoned to beggars, and left to starve in the future. Such an incredible starting hand, yet she's fumbling it spectacularly. What a moron. I froze completely, still processing these bizarre words when I glanced up into a pair of cold, lifeless eyes. Li Wei sat beneath the covered walkway dressed in plain white mourning clothes. His handsome face had grown so gaunt the bones showed through, and his compressed lips looked drained of all color. His stare made my body go rigid. I heard him ask, "Miss Zhao, what brings you to my door?" A chill shot through me. I felt like prey being observed by a predator moments before having my throat torn out. Li Wei sat in a specially constructed chair. My brain still fixated on the strange text I just witnessed and I stammered out, "I came to check on you." Check on me? For what purpose? To confirm whether I'm crippled or... I brought medicinal herbs for you. I interrupted Li Wei and signaled the steward to present the supplies we'd carried. Gesturing at the numerous containers of herbs covering the ground, I manufactured a smile and said to Li Wei, "I heard about your injury. I don't know if these will help, but please use them. I have obligations at home, so I won't linger. I'll visit again another day. Take care of yourself. Your health matters most." After speaking, I spun around and fled, not daring to remain another second. I felt certain I'd just encountered something supernatural. After returning from the Li estate, I carefully questioned everyone who'd accompanied me that day. Nobody except me had seen those words. The mysterious text had only appeared that single time at the Li estate and didn't resurface in the following days, leaving me thoroughly confused. Still, better cautious than sorry. The meaning communicated in those lines was genuinely terrifying. Perhaps like in traditional tales, this was some kind of divine fortune granted to me by heaven. I decided to act on it. That very evening, I approached my father and announced I refused to break the engagement. My father demanded to know why, and I declared I loved Li Wei. Regardless, father, I will wed nobody but Li Wei. And then I found myself locked in the ancestral shrine. My father stood outside, bellowing in rage. How could someone as intelligent as me produce such a foolish child? You'll stay inside and contemplate your actions. Steward, she gets no food for 3 days. But why would I be stupid enough to starve for 3 days? I escaped the very next evening. I climbed through the ancestral shrine window, scaled the Zhao residence wall, and once outside, I ran straight toward the Li estate. By the time the Li family steward brought me before Li Wei, I was so famished I felt dizzy and faint. I collapsed directly into his embrace. When I regained consciousness, it was afternoon the next day. Li Wei was keeping vigil beside the bed. Seeing my eyes open, he asked in a confused tone, "The physician said you fainted from hunger. What happened?" A young maidservant nearby held a tray of pastries. I snatched one and stuffed it in my mouth. Only after consuming several did I feel revived. I wiped my mouth, eyes welling with tears, and clutched Li Wei's sleeve. With my head lowered, I adopted an expression of someone too embarrassed to speak. My father wanted to cancel the engagement. I refused. So he imprisoned me in the ancestral shrine and wouldn't provide any food. Li Wei looked stunned. The hand resting on his knee trembled. You don't want to cancel the engagement? Why? Given current circumstances, ending it is the wisest choice. The general's household has fallen. Your father is acting in your best interest. As I listened, I secretly peeked up at him. Though his words sounded reasonable, the bitterness in his eyes practically overflowed. I lowered my head again and continued pitifully. No, I disagree. Since we are promised to each other, we should share both prosperity and hardship. I will not agree to cancel the engagement. Li Wei remained silent for an extended period before tossing out a brief statement. Rest properly. Then he departed. The first thing I did was ask the maidservant to arrange a full table of hot food for me. I remained at the Li estate. During this period, Li Wei brought me updates about my family. Uncle Zhao has been frequenting Minister Wang's residence lately. The two of them are quite close. I understood exactly what was happening. He plans to arrange a marriage alliance with the Wang family. My half-sister had been registered under my mother's name since birth, and she was of similar age to Minister Wang's legitimate son. Li Wei looked at me but said nothing. I walked over and sat beside him, gripping his sleeve. Li Wei, my father has already abandoned me. I only have you now. Li Wei didn't move. He sat there quietly, his face still emotionless. But I understood that in his current state, as long as he didn't push me away, it meant silent acceptance. In the days that followed, I accompanied Li Wei as he sought treatment for his leg. The process was agonizing. Li Wei became increasingly volatile and unpredictable. He cursed away all the renowned physicians who were summoned from across the land. Of the 10 doctors who came, 9 declared his leg untreatable. The last one, not wanting to face his wrath, gave an ambiguous answer, saying it depended on fate. Li Wei dismissed all the physicians and sat alone in his room. With his head bowed and his hair disheveled, he resembled a madman. I pushed open the door and entered with a bowl of medicine. I pressed the bowl into his hand. Meeting his bloodshot eyes, I told him word by word. There are countless physicians in this world. We'll consult them one by one. If this group doesn't work, we'll find the next. We're bound to discover the right one. Li Wei, don't surrender. I gripped his wrist firmly. He took a deep breath and tilted his head back, consuming the medicine. I had more faith that Li Wei's leg could heal than he did himself. Li Wei was destined to become the great Ming dynasty's only king of foreign blood. A minor leg injury was nothing. And indeed it proved true. On an unremarkable afternoon, a white-bearded elderly man knocked on the gates of the general's residence, claiming he could cure Li Wei's leg. Half a month later, Li Wei was standing. The moment Li Wei stood up, I nearly wept with joy. Nobody understood how elated I was. Li Wei took out a handkerchief and gently wiped away my tears, his movements incredibly tender. I grabbed the handkerchief from him and let out a fierce breath. To hell with the beggar's den. Whoever wants to live there can live there. I certainly won't. After his leg had completely recovered, Li Wei told me he was departing for the border to return to battle. He asked me to wait for him at the residence. In my heart, you are already my wife. When I return victorious with military achievements, I will marry you with great ceremony. I had no doubt in his words. All right, go with peace of mind. I will wait here for your triumphant return. Li Wei smiled and patted my head. Just then, the familiar text began floating before my eyes. Well, well, well. I thought the side character had gotten smarter, but she's still so stupid. As expected, a supporting character is just a supporting character. No matter how hard she tries, she can't become the female lead. So you just obediently remain in the capital, while our male protagonist goes off to the battlefield to meet his true destined partner. I snapped my shocked mouth shut and threw my arms around Li Wei's arm. I want to go with you. Li Wei chuckled and patiently explained. The battlefield is dangerous. Besides, I'm going to earn redemption through meritorious service, so the conditions will be even harsher. I can't bear to see you suffer. You just wait for me here at home. I'm not afraid of hardship. I just want to be with you. I sniffled and started crying. Auntie could accompany Uncle to the battlefield, so I can too. I don't want to be stuck at home knowing nothing about you. Just passing my days in worry and anxiety. That statement clearly resonated with Li Wei. He sighed, pulled me into his arms, and nodded, agreeing to take me with him. But before I could even celebrate, Li Wei had me dress in a common soldier's armor and join him in the ranks of the departing army. As we left the capital, the generals and officers in front rode horses, while the soldiers at the back marched on foot. Li Wei held no official rank. After General Li's death, he could only enlist as a common soldier. Fortunately, many of General Li's former subordinates were willing to follow him. All he needed was one victory, and his rise would be swift. But that didn't change the fact that he and I had to walk to the border city of Yumen. Once we were outside the capital, Li Wei offered to carry me on his back. I thought about the long journey ahead and declined his offer. Later, when I truly couldn't walk anymore, he firmly pulled me onto his back. And after that, he somehow obtained a horse and rode with me. After a long bumpy journey, we finally arrived at Yumen one evening. Common soldiers had to train at dawn. I trained with them for over 10 days before the northern tribes attacked. Li Wei, leading General Li's former subordinates, won the first major victory. He was promoted, got his own tent, and I was logically brought to his side as his assistant. From then on, I no longer had to do morning training. I slept until I woke naturally each day. A hot meal would be waiting for me when I woke up. After eating, I would wander around the city, occasionally substituting for Teacher Han at the local school, or helping Auntie Lu with her accounts at the market. My days were quite fulfilling. With each successive battle, Li Wei's rank rose higher and higher. Eventually, I no longer had to disguise myself in men's clothing and could appear as myself. I had thought that by following him to the battlefield, I would experience some thrilling moments like sharing life and death with Li Wei, taking a blade or an arrow for him to earn his life-saving gratitude. But none of that happened. The army held the northern tribes back so effectively that even in Yumen, the closest city to the battlefield, the lives of the common people were stable. Over time, I managed to become a teacher at the school. The original teacher, Master Han, was too old and after a lifetime of teaching could no longer get out of bed. In Yumen, educated people were extremely rare. Master Han was the only teacher. My father, for all his faults, had hired various tutors for me since I was young. I was proficient in nearly everything, from music and strategy to calligraphy and painting, more than qualified for the job. This evening after dinner, Li Wei held me in his arms as we watched the stars in the courtyard. The sky on the border was truly beautiful. There's a martial arts competition in the camp tomorrow. Do you want to come and watch? I was drowsy in his arms and mumbled, No, I have to teach the children tomorrow. Li Wei nodded, lifted me up, and carried me back to my room. I rolled over under the covers, watched Li Wei close the door and leave, and was just about to close my eyes when the text began floating. You big dummy, you can teach the kids another day. You have to go watch Li Wei's competition. Tomorrow's competition is the first meeting between the male and female leads. As the last two standing, they have an epic fight. Sparks fly, lightning flashes, and they totally fall for each other. Wow. So childhood sweethearts are no match for a fated encounter. No matter how deep the love, it can't beat destiny. I'm so sad. Men are all such pigs. I was instantly wide awake. A martial arts competition, was it? I was definitely going. The next day, the sky was clear and blue. When I arrived at the military camp, Li Wei's assistant eagerly led me toward the training grounds. Before we even got close, I could hear thunderous cheers and shouts. As I walked over, people I met made way for me. Teacher Zhao is here. Perfect. Young General Li is fighting right now. Hurry to the front. It's spectacular. Teacher Zhao, quickly, there's a spot here. I went and stood there looking up at the fighting ring. The two figures on it were locked in fierce combat. One of them was Li Wei. The other was also a young soldier with delicate and refined features. Dressed in combat attire, their movements, a powerful kick, a swift punch, radiated vibrant energy. If not for the strange text's warning, I would never have guessed she was a woman. She and Li Wei were evenly matched. The moment one gained an advantage, the other would instantly counter. The sparring match was absolutely brilliant. I didn't miss the bright glint in Li Wei's eyes as he looked at his opponent, a light I had never seen before. A tightness formed in my chest. I left without seeing the end. After leaving, I wandered aimlessly, not knowing where to go. I sat down by the river, staring blankly at the water in the distance. My mind was a mess. I didn't know why, but it was just a mess. Suddenly, with a splash, someone jumped into the river. My spot was hidden by trees, so the person didn't see me. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. When I saw the person undo their clothes, revealing pale shoulders and a gently rising chest, I immediately realized who it was. Relieved, I hesitated, wondering if I should make a sound. Just as I was about to leave quietly, people approached from behind. A few soldiers, arms slung over each other's shoulders, were laughing and heading toward the river. The person in the water panicked. If those soldiers came over, she wouldn't have time to escape. She would be seen completely, and the secret she had hidden for so long would be exposed. I watched the color drain from her face, then stood up and walked out. Oh, Teacher Zhao, you're here. General Li was just looking for you. I stood blocking the path and said with a smile, I felt a bit stuffy, so I came here for some fresh air. Seeing that I had no intention of moving, the men exchanged a look, then said, well, we won't disturb you then, Teacher Zhao. The men turned and left. The person in the river got dressed and came ashore. She scratched her head in embarrassment and introduced herself first. Just now, thank you, Miss Zhao. I'm Lin Yu from the cavalry. I nodded. Lin Yu had thrown on her clothes in a hurry, and they were almost completely soaked. This was definitely not a good time for a conversation. We exchanged a few pleasantries and then went our separate ways. On the way back, my mood had lightened considerably. I thought that even if Li Wei really did fall for someone else, it wouldn't be such a disaster for me. My initial reason for refusing to break the engagement, influenced by those strange words, was simply the fear of one day being disfigured and left to starve in a beggar's den. Given my current relationship with Li Wei, even if we did break the engagement, I would be able to walk away unscathed. Halfway back, I ran into Li Wei, who was searching for me. Seeing me, he looked relieved. He walked over and took my hand. Song said you came to the training grounds. Didn't you say last night you weren't coming? I swung his hand. Of course I came to witness General Li's heroic prowess in the competition. Li Wei raised an eyebrow, a smile in his eyes, looking thoroughly pleased. Then you didn't come in vain. Your general took first place and won a fine piece of leather for you. I nodded. Then I thank you, General. A verbal thank you won't be enough. On the way back, Li Wei said he would be free the next evening and wanted me to accompany him to the Lantern Festival in the city. Without waiting for my reply, he declared it was his thank you gift and I couldn't refuse. So I didn't tell him that the school was closed tomorrow and I was free not just in the evening but during the day as well. Well, a thank you gift is a thank you gift. A few days after my encounter with Lin Yu, she came to find me with some gifts, saying she wanted to thank me properly. As she was leaving, she shyly asked me to keep her secret. I nodded in agreement. I had experienced life in the military camp when I first arrived. It was hard, tiring, and very difficult. That Lin Yu could survive in there and even earn significant military honors, honestly, I admired her for it. Perhaps because of this shared secret, Lin Yu and I started seeing each other more often. She would bring me strange little trinkets she found somewhere, and I would often send her nourishing soups. Lin Yu's martial arts were among the best in the army, but she was just too thin. Considering I had seen her jump into a cold river for a bath, That kind of behavior would damage her health in the long run. Back and forth we ended up becoming good friends, which was something I hadn't expected. One day, as I was returning from delivering soup to Linyu, I ran into Li Wei at the courtyard gate. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me with his lips pressed together. I was a bit confused and spoke first. "Why are you standing at the gate instead of going in?" Li Wei suddenly reached out and pulled me into an embrace, burying his head in my shoulder. His muffled voice came out. "In half a month, the army will advance on the northern stronghold. Once I win the battle and take the top honor, we will return to the capital. Then we can finally get married." I nodded non-committally. "Your safety comes first in all things." Li Wei seemed to have more to say, but he remained silent until we were inside the courtyard. He gently released me, turned, and went into the kitchen without another word. I blinked, glanced at the kitchen, and then went to dig up the fruit wine I had buried under the tree. I had learned to make this wine from Auntie Chan next door. Her wine was renowned in Yumen. I learned from her, so I figured mine couldn't be too bad. There were 2 jars in total, one for Li Wei and me to drink and the other for Linyu. Perfect. When news of the great battle spread, the people of Yumen began to gather vegetables from their fields and pigs they had raised to send to the military camp. Some had sons in the army. Others had husbands. Those left at home were the old, the weak, women and children. Before every major battle, the camp would become a lively place. On my way I saw many scenes of families bidding farewell. When I reached Linyu's place it was quiet. She was polishing her long spear, looking no different than usual. I called to her from outside. She looked up and saw me, a puzzled look on her face. "Miss Zhao, what are you doing here?" I held up the clothes in the crook of my arm. "The journey there will take half a month. The weather is getting cold. You need to wear something thicker." Linyu froze for a moment, then took the cotton-padded clothes from my hands. I walked in myself, took out a small cloth pouch and pulled out the silk ribbons inside. "That cloth you use for chest binding is hard and stuffy. I got these from Auntie Chen. Use these from now on. They'll be more comfortable." Linyu stood there at a loss. I put the things down and didn't stay long. As I left, I told her, "Swords and blades on the battlefield have no eyes. Military merit is important, but you must prioritize your own safety. I'll wait for you to come back and drink with me." Linyu's eyes were red as she nodded heavily. It wasn't until many years later that Linyu briefly told me about her past. She came from an ordinary farming family. Her mother had given birth to 3 daughters before finally having a son. To support the son, she and her 2 older sisters were sold to different places. Linyu was sold to a brothel. She had just come of age that year. She fought desperately to escape, cut her hair with scissors, smeared her face with dirt, and threw herself into the army. In my eyes, life in the army was hard and exhausting. But Linyu said the army was good. It was the only place she could live. She had no way back. Fortunately, she endured it all, fighting with her life to carve out a path for herself. We returned to the capital in the spring. The war had ended in the winter, but it was too cold for the army to travel, so we spent the winter in Yumen. Li Wei had sustained some injuries. I made him lie in bed to recover, watching him drink his medicine every day. It's worth mentioning that Li Wei and Linyu had gone through a life-and-death situation on the battlefield together. Linyu had taken an arrow for Li Wei. The hidden arrow had been aimed at his heart. If Linyu hadn't blocked it, Li Wei would likely have been in grave danger. Li Wei held me tightly as he spoke. I could feel his fear, and I hugged him back just as tightly. At that moment I felt like I was about to never see you again. After we captured the northern Khan, I asked Linyu why she saved me. She said she was afraid that if I died, you would be sad. She took that arrow for me because of you. Whatever the reason, I Li Wei owe her my life. I must live well so as not to fail her. What was all this about? And what was with that look? As if you were guarding against a thief. I pushed his head away. I'm going to take some medicine to Linyu. You just lie there and rest. Once the weather warmed up, returning to the capital was put on the agenda. Li Wei had won a great victory this time, capturing the northern Khan alive, and expanding the territory of the Great Ming. This was something even his father had never accomplished. When the army entered the capital, the crown prince led all the officials to welcome them at the city gates. and the common people lined the streets to cheer. Li Wei went to the palace, and I returned to the Li residence. Not long after I sat down, the steward rushed in to report that my father had arrived. When I saw my father, his face was glowing and he couldn't stop smiling. The moment I stepped through the door, he strode over, took my hand and said repeatedly, "As expected of my daughter, you correctly predicted that Li Wei wouldn't fall. You are our family's great hero now." I forcefully pulled my hand back. "Father, hurry up and prepare my dowry. I'm in a hurry to get married. The dowry can't be small or people will say our family is social climbing." "Nonsense. What social climbing? My daughter stood by Li Wei when he was still nobody. Where could he find such a good woman? It's his good fortune to marry you." I had to restrain myself to maintain a smile. In any case, Li Wei has been promoted now. Our family can't look too shabby and become a laughingstock. "Father, you figure it out." Watching my father's retreating back, I thought about many things. For example, the words I could see had said that Li Wei would hold a grudge against me for breaking the engagement, leading to me being disfigured and thrown into a beggar's den to starve. If that had really happened, what would my family have been doing? No matter how vengeful Li Wei was, he wouldn't be so idle as to stop my father from bringing me a steamed bun in a beggar's den, would he? How would I have starved to death? And for another example, I had followed Li Wei to the border for over a year with no news. Now that I was finally back, the first things my father said were all like that. Not a single question about whether I was well, if I had been hurt, or if I had suffered. Not a single one. Although I had always known my father was opportunistic, it was only at this moment that I truly felt his coldness. It wasn't until Li Wei returned from the palace that I felt happy again. Li Wei was also very happy. He reached out, lifted me into his arms, and spun me around in the courtyard. He said with a laugh, "I've inherited my father's title. I also mentioned us to His Majesty. The imperial edict for our marriage will arrive in a few days. I can finally marry you. We're getting married." I was dizzy from the spinning and lay in his arms. I knew how hard Li Wei had worked to achieve this moment of joy. Fortunately, the clouds had finally parted to reveal the moon. Li Wei said the imperial edict for our marriage would arrive in a few days. But after more than 10 days, there was still no news from the palace. Li Wei had already started taking his men to purchase the necessary items for the wedding, leaving the house in high spirits every day. I stayed in my room embroidering my wedding dress. My already married half-sister made a special trip to help me. While chatting, I asked her if she was doing well in her husband's family. She smiled smugly and said, "Don't worry, sister. I'm doing very well." I was relieved. Originally, my father had his eye on Minister Wang's legitimate son, but my sister had taken a liking to his second son. I had already run away by then, so my father could only rely on my sister and had to go along with her wishes. It seemed she had chosen correctly. This sister of mine had been extremely clever since she was young. In her own words, she could play those people to death. Embroidering a wedding dress was time-consuming and energy-draining. I worked on it for nearly half a month, while Li Wei practically transformed the entire residence. The most obvious change was the red silk hanging inside and out, filling every corner with a festive atmosphere. But strangely, the imperial edict for our marriage never came. One day, Lin Yu invited me to burn incense at a temple outside the city. The bodhisattva enshrined in this temple was said to be very efficacious. When Lin Yu returned to the capital, she was rewarded for her merits and given an official post. She was now a junior general. She is now working under Li Wei. Apart from other things, they are a pair who cooperate well in work. Li Wei had once mentioned to me after dinner one evening that when he was in Yumen, he had considered transferring Lin Yu to be his assistant. I didn't know about that, but I did know that Lin Yu had been in the cavalry in Yumen and had never served as Li Wei's assistant. I asked him about it and Li Wei said, "When I sparred with her back then, I admired her skills. I thought that if I had such a fierce general under my command, the time it would take to return to the capital could be shortened considerably. But then I saw that woman always trying to curry favor with you. I was too busy being on guard against her to even think about having her under my nose." At that moment I was stunned. So the bright look in Li Wei's eyes when he looked at Lin Yu during the competition was because of that. When I offered incense to the bodhisattva, I wanted to pray for many things. But in the end I only made one wish, for Lin Yu, Li Wei, and myself to be safe and well. I just hoped the Bodhisattva wouldn't think I was greedy for praying for 3 people at once and refuse my wish. On our way down the mountain we encountered a dangerous situation. A group of mountain bandits was chasing a carriage, forcing it to the edge of a cliff. Lin Yu drew her sword and charged at the bandits without hesitation. I led the remaining maids and guards to pull back the carriage, which was about to fall. The carriage curtain was blown open by the wind, revealing a lavishly dressed young lady inside. She looked terrified, her hands gripping the window frame tightly, her face pale and her red, swollen eyes filled with the despair of facing death. My heart went out to her and I comforted her. "Don't be afraid. I'll pull you up." She nodded at me vigorously, tears streaming down her face. Fortunately, I had brought enough people and we slowly pulled the teetering carriage back onto solid ground. Just then, text began to flash rapidly before my eyes. If the female supporting character knew she was saving Princess Mingzhu, the very person who's going to steal her husband, she would definitely regret it, right? The reason the marriage edict is so delayed is because the emperor values Li Wei and wants to marry the princess to him. Wow! Miss Zhao and Li Wei finally returned to the capital and could get married, but now a princess has appeared out of nowhere. The ship I'm on is about to sink. I'm so sad. I froze for a moment but didn't let go of the carriage. I didn't know before but I knew now. But so what? This was a living, breathing person. In human life was valued above all else. By the time Lin Yu had dealt with the bandits, my group had pulled the carriage completely back onto the road. Lin Yu and I helped the young lady out of the carriage. She thanked us, crying intermittently. A short while later, a troop of guards on horseback came galloping up the mountain path. The leading officer knelt before the young lady. "Your subordinate was late in coming to the rescue. Please forgive me, Your Highness." Princess Mingzhu was quickly surrounded and led away. On the way back to the city, Lin Yu held my hand and talked to me a lot. One thing she said stunned me. She said she wanted to marry me. I covered my mouth, looking from her to myself, the meaning unspoken but clear. "You, we are both women. Why are you talking nonsense?" Lin Yu waved her hands, her face blushing. "It's not what you think. I mean, if you ever need it, I can help you." That was Princess Mingzhu. At the last palace banquet, His Majesty intended to betroth the princess to Li Wei. Although he refused, it's clear His Majesty hasn't given up. We can't question the affairs of the royal family, but one thing is certain. If Li Wei ever fails you, I will take you away. I have an official post now in my own residence. It might not be as comfortable as the Li estate, but I will do everything in my power to give you a good life. I looked at her, my heart filled with complex emotions, something swelling up inside my chest. Before I could speak, texts began to fly rapidly before my eyes. Though they were just words, I could tell they were very excited. Ooh, this could work. The two of them, I've wanted to say it for a long time. They're super sweet together. The following content became somewhat explicit with some words replaced by symbols, making it hard to understand. I selectively ignored these words and first thanked Lin Yu for her kind offer. I thought if it really came to that, this was a viable escape route. I have always been someone who plans for herself. But what happened next was rather unexpected. The day after we returned, Princess Mingzhu, with a large retinue of palace maids and eunuchs, knocked on the gates of the Li residence with great fanfare. She brought me many luxurious fabrics and jewelry, and at the same time the imperial edict for my marriage. After I returned, I learned your identity from the palace servants. So I went to Father Emperor and asked for this marriage edict. The princess took my hand warmly, handed the edict to Li Wei, and tilted her chin at him, saying, "Miss Zhao is my lifesaver. If you dare treat her poorly, I will have Father Emperor banish you to a bitter, cold land and never let you return." I listened with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. Who could have predicted such a turn of events? As the princess left, she happily announced that she would attend my wedding banquet and even see me off on my wedding day. I nodded in agreement. After many twists and turns, my marriage to Li Wei was finally set for the 3rd month of the coming year. But in the 2nd month of the new year, urgent news came from the border. The new Khan of the northern tribes had allied with the Rong from the west. Retry. Continue. Amassing an army of 100,000 strong, and was pressing toward Yumen. The northerners sent an envoy to the capital, demanding that the great Ming return the cities they had lost and send a princess for a marriage alliance, or else their army would invade. The two sides had just finished a major war not long ago, and both were greatly weakened. Logically, they should have been recuperating, but the northerners and the Rong had formed an alliance. Li Wei began leaving early and returning late. A few days later, he brought back news that most of the ministers at court advocated for the marriage alliance and returning the conquered cities. Li Wei was furious. I had seen with my own eyes how hard won the previous victory had been. It was no exaggeration to say that the victory was built upon the flesh and blood of countless soldiers. But now, not only did they have to return the cities, but they also had to send a princess. And currently the royal family only had one princess of suitable age, Princess Mingzhu. A few days later, a palace eunuch came with a message saying that Mingzhu had invited me for an outing. Ever since I rescued Mingzhu from the bandits, we had gradually become good friends. And because we were both women, Mingzhu often invited me to gatherings. But this time the atmosphere lacked its previous ease. We went to a hillside halfway up a mountain in the suburbs. The scenery here was excellent, a precious spot we had discovered by chance. Sitting on a blanket on the grass, Mingzhu smiled and raised her cup to me, then drained it in one gulp. She looked at the capital city not far below the foot of the mountain and twisted her lips. I might never see such scenery again. The news from the court could not be hidden from her. Her face flushed from the wine. She snuggled up and hugged me. As a princess, I accepted my duty long ago. I knew this day would come sooner or later. To trade my single life for 100 years of peace for the great Ming, so the people don't suffer from the ravages of war. It's well worth it. She buried her head in my arms and said in a muffled voice, "It's a pity I won't be able to see you off on your wedding day. I promised, but now I have to break my word." After she finished speaking, she turned and left, not daring to stay a moment longer. That night, back at the residence, I pulled Li Wei aside and asked him, "If we have to go to war, what are our chances of winning?" Li Wei wasn't surprised by my question. He held me and sat down, answering seriously, 60%. If I am the commander-in-chief with Lin Yu as my second in command, it could be 80%. Before I could be happy, I heard him add, "His Majesty is old. He's been scared witless by those civil officials. He won't agree to send troops. How can that be? Is a marriage alliance the only way? I was the one who saved Mingzhu's life. Listen, those northerners are wolves in sheep's clothing. They've been planning to annex us from the start. This talk of marriage alliances and returning cities is just a stalling tactic. My dear girl, don't be foolish. If Princess Mingzhu is sent over, she'll just be tortured to death by those savages." I stared at the words only I could see, my own rapid heartbeat echoing in my ears. I grabbed Li Wei's arm. For the first time, I revealed a side of myself I had always hidden from him. I said, "Wei, the crown prince is already a grown man. His Majesty is old and frail. The crown prince has always supported sending troops." This information came from my sister, who is now a minister's wife. Her husband was a supporter of the crown prince. That night I didn't sleep a wink. I waited all night for Li Wei, who had left the residence. He didn't return until the crack of dawn, but he brought good news. Soon after, the emperor fell gravely ill and the crown prince became regent. The officials who were unwilling to fight were dragged out by the crown prince, and a few were beheaded in front of everyone. After that, no one dared to object. Li Wei was appointed the grand general who pacifies the nation and led the army to war. On the day of his departure, Mingzhu and I watched them leave from the city walls. The war lasted a long time. At one point, when supplies were running low, Mingzhu, sword in hand, visited the residences of many powerful nobles, pressing the blade to their necks and forcing them to contribute money. I followed behind her, leading a group of palace servants with large chests to collect the gold, silver, and jewels the ministers brought out. Another 2 winters passed before news of a great victory came from the border. On the day of my wedding to Li Wei, the banquet was incredibly lively. Mingzhu and Lin Yu saw me off together. Lin Yu had already resumed her female identity. She was now the dynasty's one and only female general. A year after our marriage, I gave birth to a daughter. Both Lin Yu and Mingzhu wanted to be the godmother. They argued until they were red in the face. I tried to mediate, saying they could both be godmothers. Lin Yu, relying on her superior skills, had already snatched the baby and was cooing at her in her arms. Mingzhu chased after her, cursing. I shook my head and saw Li Wei give me a look. The two of us quietly slipped away from the crowd to find some peace and quiet elsewhere. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more incredible tales. Drop a comment below telling me which character was your favorite. Was it our clever protagonist, the loyal Lin Yu, or the brave Princess Mingzhu? I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next video.